the Chinese garden. And Mari is my wonderful assistant. And we're the team that works on developing the cultural programs we offer here. And personally, it is astounding the number of programs we do. Last year we did over 1,000 programs in the garden that are all free. And this poetry series, we do a poetry series in April and October every year. This particular series is part of the tea month, so we call it Steeped in Words, which is one of the reasons why we serve a little teeny sip of tea. And thank you so much for coming. It's all of our program partners. We have about 60 of them, and they are all volunteers. So Christopher is a volunteer today, and we're really honored to have Christopher Luna here to do a poetry reading. And it's wonderful that he invited Beth Karp, is it Karp?
Yes.
Here, pianist, local pianist, and Christopher is the Poet Laureate of Karp County, which is quite an honor. And again, thank you so much for coming. We do encourage you to be members, so you could come all the time and enjoy all the programming we do. But otherwise, I'll turn it over to Christopher.
So I think that Gary and maybe some other people were curious about the whole, because we're curious about the piano. I've been reading with musicians since about 1992. It's my favorite way to present my work, and I'm still getting to know, even though I've been in this area for about 10 years, I still feel like I'm getting to know the musicians in this area, in Portland. So really happy that timing-wise it came together, that I had this coming up and that I met and worked with Beth and that she was willing to come. So you'll get to hear her lovely music in a little while, but I'm going to start with a few poems on my own, and then you'll hear some from Beth. This is one of my favorites. It's called Some Angels Can't Dance. This is definitely the place. This is the goddess cotillion. There is no sight more heartbreaking than the transformation of a woman's shape as she raises her arms above her head, breasts rising into a stretch. My goddess angels have taught me more about the divine in the past year than a lifetime of priests and pastors were able. And this one's called The Shroud of the Little Explorers. And I'm not even sure if I've ever read this one in public. Hope you like it. Traces of our lovin' left behind, white stars splashed across, deep scarlet red, like comets traversing the Milky Way. Impressionist hieroglyphic, evidence of the sweetest and most essential civil war imaginable. This I'd like to dedicate to my life partner and fiance, Toni Partington, because it was written about her, and it could not have been written if she did not find her way into my life. The good things in life are better than any damn movie. The search for love is a pink herring, a desire to possess or become a character in a Hollywood romance, never bothering to see or get to know your leading lady. A game that necessarily renders both of you meaningless, formless shadows flickering on the wall. The only way to avoid this unhappy ending is to refuse to play the game at all. Be exactly who you are. Open your heart, and eventually your little Queenie will walk through the door. Phosphine Dream for John Pudzinski. I have a real, this is one of my friends from the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics in Boulder, Colorado, where I was a student from 97 to 99. John is one of those people who is really dedicated to so-called experimental poetry. Even people who write experimental poetry don't know what that means. I guess experimental poetry means things that people write where people are not immediately aware of what it is or why it exists. So anyway, I was thinking about some things that are hard to describe, which most of the really important things in life are hard to describe, and I was thinking about my friend John when I wrote Phosphine Dream. The man who is aroused by everything in the universe must inevitably be regarded as a deviant. Many are baffled and intimidated by such limitless love. Perhaps the knowledge that he has enough for all makes them feel less special. And doesn't everyone want to feel special? Centuries pass between each breath. The heart shatters every moment, sending luminous tendrils spiraling outward, shattering into infinite points, each of which carries the bliss born of boundless possibility, always more than enough for everyone. I'm going to take some of the tea. How is the tea?
Nice.
I haven't tried it.
Cheers, salad.
Yes, there's two here. Keen, fitful gusts after Keats. If you want to really impress people, tell them that you wrote something after reading Keats. No, that's a joke about the fact that at Naropa, which is where the Kerouac School is, and in general, I mean, I think that people, how do we put it? You know, the focus is on poetry from, post-World War II till now. And basically, like in poetry, and this is one of the reasons why I do things in the community, is that some people think that if it doesn't sound and look like William Shakespeare, it's not poetry, but of course, a million things have happened since then, and at least since 1920 or so, all bets have been off. So the cool thing about meeting young and new writers is helping them to understand that the possibilities are limitless. It's not just one thing. Whatever that one thing was that someone taught you it was, it's that, plus it's all these other great things. But all of us, all the people I know who are very firmly in the 21st century, we read Keats. I love Andrew Marvell. We read all that stuff. We're just not living in that time, so we're writing poems for our time. So keen, fitful gusts after Keats. Chill runs through neglected chest like a sanctified stalactite plunged into the heart of an undead foe. A freezing jab not unlike truth that prevents peaceful slumber. What have you to fear from the coming of the new year? The crow's judgment. One breeze upon which to glide over the heads of children, bold enough to imagine that they have the ability to control the weather. So maybe magic exists, and the thing that kills it is when your parents tell you, that's not possible, that's not true, you can't do that. So I made the decision when my young son looked me in the eye and told me that he could make it rain, to not discourage him from trying to do so, and not tell him what I thought about that. And I'm not sure that I know whether he could do it or not. So I don't want to be the guy to squash his dreams. He's going to have plenty of people out there in this supposed real world to squash his dreams. Shouldn't be his dad doing that. This is a recent one called Show Me Your True Face. And mushrooms are going to become a kind of a theme today. So this will be mushroom poem number 1. Show me your true face. Elements conspire to alleviate mind fog and allow colorblind explorer to separate the greens. To see and differentiate between several distinct shades in each blade of grass, each leaf. Breeze shimmers, soil hums, spirits imprisoned in ancient bark scream in anguish. And the enormous trees guarding the fort reveal themselves to be sentient beings with individual histories and personalities, willing to show their true face to one who is willing to make the time. An afternoon remarkable enough that even the wandering shrew has a smile on her face, warm enough to cause him to wonder if perhaps he had misjudged her. Somewhere along the way, he becomes the blade, rooted, fated to move as the wind commands. Heat increases perception of distance. Squirrel, stared down, flinches and leaps at the arrival of Sunday douchebag on a motorized scooter, causing the animal to lose the staring contest. Finally home, thirst quenched, rest upon the queen's bosom to watch the ceiling lose its solidity and ripple like lake water. Each ripple, each blade, worthy of respect, worthy of forgiveness. So, so I have one more on my own before I'm going to ask Beth Karp to come up and play a few songs. This is called Right Off, after Miles Davis, and it's after one of the 2 tracks on Miles Davis's tribute to Jack Johnson. The first one's called Right Off, and so I wrote it as I was listening to that track, and it's been through various versions. I have such a deep respect for musicians, and definitely for a deep respect and love for Miles Davis, that I really think writing about jazz is the most difficult thing to do, but what I can do is write as I'm listening to it, because I find it so inspiring. So this is kind of about Miles and not about Miles at the same time, but he helped unlock something in my brain that allowed me to write this. Right Off. Unholy summit, deviant representation of sunrise heartache, expectation, desire's volume, aesthetic snobbery vanquished, overheard nonsense obliterated. Step into, ease into the new, the ancient, the liberated firebringer joint you always pictured, angry like a color, shaking its veined finger at your open eyes, your crushed heart clarified. The awkwardness of subconscious revealed in a public place during business hours did not mean to be so obvious about it. Forgive me, love me anyway. There are many forms that love can take. Born to suffer, mouth open, hands outstretched to grasp rather than receive. Gluttony, a symptom of lack of belief in self, a need for constant reassurance. When do we sit? When do we rest? When do we let go? When can we be? Movement, always a possibility, but you must give yourself permission. Perhaps the pallbearers jam in heaven, soaring celestial distortion, psychedelic majesty, genius collaboration cut down, brass bliss, origin of all this, bended notes that give birth to new planets, always there, though unseen. I think I see one in your eye. Unexpected exclamation, it's the quiet ones, always the quiet ones. This complacency, not a new arrival. Cry for those who can't. Stand tall for the lame. Be brave to honor those paralyzed with fear. Show them how. Wail together. Call the spirits to rise and take human form again, if only for a moment. Call them home for one more embrace. The star on a wet cheek expands into a river, a wisp of sage, a shooting star in the living room. So why not give me a smile? Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce pianist and composer Beth Karp, who's going to play some of her music for you, or perhaps, I don't know what she's going to play.
Some of mine,
Perhaps
some of other
by
people's.
someone else.
Yes. I'm going to play 3 pieces for you. And the first one is by a composer named Robert Schumann, who I hope you've heard of. This is a piece called Traumagaya, which means dreams. And it's quite beautiful. And I'll take a moment to find it, and I'll play for you. The next 2 that I'm going to play after that, one of them is an arrangement that I did of a Jewish folk tune celebrating the arrival of the new moon. And the other one is an original that I composed as a little film score. There we are.
to Beth Karp. And if you enjoyed what you heard, Beth has an event coming up on Wednesday, October 30th. After the reading, there's some cards here about it. One of the things that Beth does is composes music for accompaniment to silent films, and so she'll be doing that for the 1920 film The Golem, and that's at Alberta Rose Theatre, and Wednesday the 30th at 7 p.m. Anything else you want to say to them about that event?
Yes, if you are interested, please come. This is a major booking for me I'm very excited about, and I think I hope I've done justice to a very beautiful movie. It'll be the night before Halloween. It's a very spooky movie. And if you pick up a handbill, I can give you a coupon code to get you cheaper tickets. So talk to me.
Yeah, we don't want you to be shy after. There's things on the table behind us we want you to see, so we'll want you to take a quick look. The first piece that we're going to do together is one that really means a lot to me. It's called Magic Taken Seriously. I have sleep apnea. The time that I wrote this, I think it was before I found out about it. Until I knew that I needed some help to get the proper amount of sleep so that I could have energy during the day, I was trying to be a hands-on son to my father and really just sort of crapping out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which, you know, like when he was a toddler, that's when he had the most energy. So I would fall asleep and really need about an hour nap around 3 o'clock, and then I'd have this, you know, kid jumping up and down on my chest. So what happened was, this is one of those days that you have a lot when you have a small child. I took him and his friend to the park. I sat on at a picnic table while they were playing, and I'm sort of like drifting in and out of consciousness. Now, the other writers in the room might have had this experience where sometimes some of the best material you get is when you're drifting in and out of consciousness, and I'm amazed at what came out of that because I wasn't completely with it or conscious when I wrote this, and I was really happy with the results. So a lot of the things that Beth and I are going to do would be things I would describe as some of my favorite things that I've written over the last few years. So thank you to her, and this is called Magic Taken Seriously. An invisible sigil passed on like a secret amulet from a school teacher to a lion caged. Yet keeping one eye fixed on the door. Worry not, their time is swiftly drawing to a close. The crow's gate is trailed by a lingering nimbus, the after-image of a hypnagogic dream, deferred, let go, forgotten, like a mental grocery list left behind in a rusty old filing cabinet. There is a folder labeled Wishes, filled to overflowing. Frayed bits of ideas fold out like withered petals. The rubber band that once held it together, crusted, long since snapped, limp, collecting dust in an aluminum coffin. In need of a personal secretary or a French maid to dust out the static and the habit-forming poison of lies repeated often enough to begin to resemble truth. The collector paces in circles like monk before the piano, unable to put a single film in the can or part with the spiral notebooks containing conjugated verbs from Mr. Samperi's 7th grade Italian class. Cave wall. Picnic table. Province of those who find it difficult to believe that any of us are here at all. How arrogant to presume that it is possible to leave anything behind. This anxiety returns us to the first and last question. If all is connected, what is the nature of the thread? If energy never dies, but is transformed, from where, or whom, or what does the transmission originate? Furthermore, if you knew the answer, would it change anything? Would your dream be worth remembering? Would your cabinet be filled again? Would you be lucid enough to take control and begin anew? Thanks. I need some water. Thank you to Beth, too. The little secret that all poets know about working with musicians that maybe the other poets are not as honest as I am about is that the musicians always make us look better. I'm pretty confident, I've been doing this for a long time, but still, it's like, I just have such a deep respect for what they do, and when we're doing this, I just feel like what they do is incredible, and that's why I keep doing it. And we're always, in any kind of collaboration, I do a lot of collaborative work, there's a third thing that's created that's not possible if either one of the two of you were kind of doing it on your own, and that's what I like. I like to have that, to facilitate that spark happening, Okay, so this next one is called Alliteration is Not a Nightclub. Admonitions linger like brands. Involuntary tattoos which announce our vulnerabilities. No telling when the pipe will burst, forcing memories out to ruin our hardwood floors. Who will be there to hold you when the fissure occurs? Who will stroke your hair, assure you that everything is going to be all right? People are not birds. Your heart is not a feather. The bow on your shoe, not an invitation. Still, my heart tells me to scoop you up, offer you the sanctuary of my chest, and keep you safe from further harm. Yeah. I teared up a little bit. I do a lot of poetry workshops, and I have a reputation now as someone who makes people cry. Of course, I don't think I'm making them cry. So what I would say to people in that scenario is, why are we involved in this poetry thing? Why are we doing this writing thing? You want to think about the things that got you excited about poetry, or art, or music. It's the things that make you feel something, right? So if in trying to create it yourself, you don't feel anything, or you try to stop yourself from feeling those things, then I kind of feel like you're not completely doing your job, or that you're not ready, maybe, to completely do it. And so I don't mind being that guy who encourages people. And then when they cry, we try to be sensitive. I'm not talking about making fun of people in a room. It's not about that at all. It's actually about helping them to feel comfortable enough so that there's trust, so that we can cry together, because there's things to cry about, and it's cool, it's all right. And it's probably going to lead to a better poem. That's, poets are always thinking about it in that selfish way too, is how do I get the best poem out of this, crappy situation? So, some of these poems, and this happens frequently at poetry readings, we have other poets in the room so they can confirm this. Some of these poems will be shorter than my comments about the poems today. So I apologize to those for whom I'm incredibly uninteresting. Here we go. This is called Pavement Pastoral. There is a determined melancholy to the suicide dive of autumn leaves as they tear themselves from the limbs of trembling trees to spiral earthward like eels caught in zoetrope flicker. Okay, well, there's a great story about how that poem was written. I said so much before. If you want to know the story about how that poem was written, we'll talk about it after. There's going to be like a social aspect to this at a certain point. All right? Okay, so this is, one of the things that you should do, I know there's people in the room that probably will facilitate poetry workshops at some point, is take them outside at some point. I mean, especially if you get lucky enough in the Northwest to have a day like this. Even if you didn't have it in your plan to go outside, just go outside. And even if your prompt has nothing to do with being outside, do it outside anyway. But, so what we did this day was we went down to Esther Shore Park, which is a beautiful park in Vancouver where we live, and I basically just set them loose to walk around and write for a little while, and then we came back together and read stuff to each other. And this is what I came up with, and it's called The Poem Waits for Us in the Park. And I don't remember who starts this one. I do, okay. I start this one, so I'll say the title again, and then I'll start in a less awkward way. The poem waits for us in the park. Muse glides into the picture. Her nipples precede her. Maui, it was healing. Gothic spiderweb branch stretches across tan collarbone. Beads of sweat inviting a kiss or contemplation of sustenance. Nothing will fall except that which can no longer stand. This process will not harm you. Cleavage, dogs, leashed and unleashed. Swimsuited 2-year-old commands balloon horsey forward. Everyone on the grass or on the move. Each blade is alive. Entertain the possibility that they may be sentient. Carried her son to this spot in 1960. Here she finds herself again. We all leave, we all return. Are we talking about a line or a circle? Both? I am here. I am a rich man. And I am surrounded by beauty. Okay. I want to thank all of you for being here. It's good to see friends and also some people who I haven't met. I look forward to meeting you afterwards. And I really want to thank Gary Wilson and Lancy Chinese Garden. I also would really like to thank Daniel Scatch Mills, who is a poet who I really admire and respect, and he's the person that puts together this great series. I hope everybody knows that they'll be doing this every Saturday this month with different poets. One of the poets that'll be here later this month is Suzanne Sigafus, who's here in the front row, so please come back and hear Suzanne. What else did I want to mention? The Garden is kind enough to print a broadside for every reading. So they have printed a broadside of the last poem that we're going to do for you. It's again one of my favorites. It's mushroom poem number 2. It's called Burnt Retina. It took me a really long time to come up with that title too. I had a pretty decent poem for a long time before coming up with that. And there's a story behind Burnt Retina, so if anybody wants to know that story, I'd be happy to share it with you later. So yeah, a poem about the experience of being on psychedelic mushrooms. I don't mind talking about it publicly because I've never had a bad experience, and I figure if I let people know in public that I'm into them, you know, maybe someone will have them with them, you know, who knows what will happen. And if you did something that didn't lead to the destruction of your entire family, why wouldn't you want people to know about it? It was pretty groovy, it was okay. I did it more than once and nobody got hurt, including me.
Oh yeah.
There's me again. Okay. Burnt Retina. Joseph Campbell and John Cage sat on a toadstool discussing dreams. parsing out the pattern in the scarf around Joe's neck. Electric wire choking the life out of a tree limb. It was as if they had stared into each other's eyes forever. The larger and smaller friend eschewed the street, preferring charcoal to the sinister marsh. John poured mushroom tea into his eye socket. Little was said. John Cage was a very talented mushroom hunter. Ever since the first time, I've needed a fistful. Can I have 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence, please? God, it just went blank. Fell silent in the spot where they'd left the tea strainer. The day John Cage died, I heard a cough in the wood. Found a mushroom cap, a very personal collar. Wept. For you. For me. You lean forward. Tip a cap toward me. Glimmer. Open for me. I fall into the inverted lotus. Crawl forward into the stem, diminishing as I go. Sod between my fingers, dew on my back. Insects ascend the stalks, beginning at my ankles. I roll, tumble, and land on my back. Eyes assaulted by sunlight, dissipating into clouds which resemble your spinning petals. Blossom, embossed upon my fluttering eyelids, as I am pulled into the earth, my return complete. One with the sod, worm food, finished, done for. Replenished. A seed at the beginning and end of a long story. I missed a word. That familiar was silent. Thank you to Beth Karp. I feel like my life is all the moments waiting for these moments where you have a chance to share some of your work with other people, and so there's a visceral thing that can happen when it's working, and that happened for me today. And when you are able to work with a brilliant musician, then it's like being shot at some kind of brilliant cannon, some kind of beautiful cannon together. We didn't know exactly how this was going to go any much more than you did. We did some rehearsal, but still anything can happen, right? So that was beautiful, and I enjoyed it. I was told that part of these events is a Q&A, so and Beth would be happy to answer any questions too. So does anybody have anything that they want to ask either one of us? Get some water while you're thinking about it. There's going to be a quiz on mushrooms after the show. Yeah, in the back, please.
So I wondered if, Beth, you are creating phrases in your mind as you're creating your music as well.
Thank you.
If I'm creating phrases in my mind as I create music, do you mean verbal phrases or musical phrases?
Verbal.
I think that Christopher's imagery is really rich and it gives me a lot to play off of. And when I love working with words, I love poetry and I read a lot, and I often feel a lot more inspired by literature and by verbal things than by just trying to pull some musical idea out of the ether. So I hear his phrases, and they give me ideas of where I want to go. And some of the music that you heard today was improvised. Some of it was pre-composed. Some of it was by other composers. And I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Could you mention who the other composers are, just
Yeah.
so you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Magic Taken Seriously, which was the first one we did, I integrated a couple of pieces. A piece by Bella Bartok called Dawn. That was the whole Tony thing you heard. And then a piece by Charles Ives called The Unanswered Question. Does anybody know this piece, The Unanswered Question? Oh, if you were classical music aficionados, your experience would have been a little bit richer, because Christopher's poem is all about the deeper questions in life, and so is the piece The Unanswered Question. File that one away in your brain bank and look it up when you get home, because it's got these beautiful strings that are spaced out all through the ensemble. And it creates this spacey texture that represents the rhythms of the universe. And then there's a trumpet going, which represents the deepest question, what is the meaning of life? So I thought that would be a really fitting piece to match with Chris's.
Yeah. And I didn't know the Ives piece either, so there's a gift that she gave me and all of you. You had a question too, Karp?
What age did you start writing?
Oh, yeah, well, I started writing when I was about 11, and I started by imitating Stephen King. I was writing short stories. I was really into horror. I mean, I still am, but I was very much into horror at that point, and so I was writing those kinds of stories. And like a lot of people, I wrote some melodramatic, woe is me type poetry as a teenager in high school, but I didn't really concentrate on writing poetry until I was in my 20s. I had just been kicked out of film school. It was a great experience at film school, but it was sort of like the first time I had really failed at anything, because I was an overachiever. And so as I was, living with my parents and trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, as a lot of people in their 20s are trying to figure it out, I read Allen Ginsberg's collected poems, and I read Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, and that was it. And one of the things that Allen did that was wonderful is that there's a glossary at the back of the collected poems. And that's how I found out about the school that he founded, the school I mentioned earlier, the Jack Kerouac School of Disembodied Poetics. And Jack Kerouac was a good friend of Allen Ginsberg's, who Ginsberg always acknowledged as a person that he learned a lot from as a poet. Even though Kerouac is known mostly for his prose, they were really close, and they taught each other, I think, a lot about poetry and prose, and both of them really appreciated jazz, which I did too, which is, I think, there's a connection there because both of those writers are East Coast, and I'm from New York, I'm from Long Island, and of course Whitman wrote about Long Island, and Ginsberg was in Jersey and in New York and writing about that whole area, so that helped, and if there are people here who haven't read Whitman, I mean, one of the reasons I would recommend it is that it's these poems from the 1800s that I really feel like you feel as if he's speaking to you now, or that's how I felt. So I assume there must be other people that will have that direct transmission from Whitman, and the New York connection was just one sort of way into that. I know that's more than what you asked, but I mean, it's the kind of, I think if you ask other writers, you'll get other kind of stories. And what's funny about the Kerouac School and Naropa, which is the first Buddhist university in the West, is that everybody that goes to Naropa has a story of how they got there. It's not a simple decision, and it's not the right place for everybody, and it's not the right fit for everybody. So however it is that you made your way there, it's usually some kind of winding thing. And I promise I didn't even start to tell you the story of how I got there. I just sort of hinted at the book that led me there. Yeah, so, and that glossary, it doesn't explain who people like Richard Nixon are. He doesn't go overboard, but he tries to kind of like fill in the blanks for some people. And he had to assume in '87, when that book came out, that many of his readers would have been like me, younger people who were encountering some of these historical events and some of the Buddhist philosophy that he talks about for the first time. So I think it's a great, and he was a teacher like a lot of us are, so that was a great gift from Allen Ginsberg that he included that in that version of the books, because the little individual books don't have glossaries. You're just on your own to do your research, So, anybody else want to ask anything of either one of us?
Something?
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to hear about when you're at Naropa, who like one or two of the readings or people who came through, or the teachers that, one or two of them that were just the most exciting for you?
Okay. Yeah, for me, the first name would have to be Ed Sanders, and I had some familiarity with Ed before I got there, but he became so important to me. Ed Sanders was a member of the Fugs, the 1960s group who were among those who tried to levitate the Pentagon. And Ed is still around and lives in Woodstock, New York. And Ed really loved Charles Olson, who would be among a long list of names that I encountered at Naropa that I had not encountered at all as a young person before coming there. And he's hard to read, so even people that are a little older and know him are probably, it's like Ezra Pound, they're probably scared to read him for a little while. But anyway, so Charles Olson's ideas led to this thing that Ed Sanders developed called investigative poetry. And the idea with investigative poetry is you're incorporating the same skills and techniques that a historian or a journalist would use to write narrative poems. And if you happen to write a long narrative poem about a time period that you actually lived through, then you can include yourself as a character. So Ed Sanders wrote a book called 1968 that was all about what happened that year. He also wrote a multi-volume history of America in verse. So when he gets to the part of it where the Fugs and and the peace movement all becomes, and he was hanging out with people like Janis Joplin, and because the Fugs was a really successful rock and roll band for a little while, for a short period of time, and they're still around. The Fugs are still around, even though some members have died. They're still doing shows and things, so they're keeping all that alive. Yeah, so he talks about that, and he later wrote a biography of Ginsberg in verse because Ginsberg was a mentor and friend to him, and he wrote a great book that's an investigative poem about Hurricane Katrina and the aftermath of that. So, what I love about the concept of investigative poetry is that you could use it to write about almost anything. But in terms of using investigative poetry to write a poem about something that happened during your lifetime, what's powerful about it is if you choose to, you can kind of in this way that Joseph Campbell wrote about, begin to see yourself as the hero of your own story or a character in the story and integrate it into that. And I think that that's powerful when people are brave enough to do that.